What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some buy low trade targets after week one of the NFL season. I think early on in the year is the best time to capitalize on some buy lows. You're going to have league managers overreacting. Everyone's living and dying, with their week one production. So I think there are some windows here to buy low on these players. If you enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But let's dive right into my first target, and it is going to be Omarion Hampton. I kind of like targeting the primetime games for some of these buy lows because these are typically the games that every single person is watching. Everyone's sitting down Friday night watching the Chiefs take on the Chargers. And I was kind of surprised on the overall negative reaction to Hampton's week one, not because he had this amazing fantasy day and everyone was just, freaking out for no reason. He didn't produce for fantasy, right? 8.1 PPR points, 15 carries for an inefficient 48 yards, 2 targets, 2 receptions for 13 yards, 0 touchdowns. However, the usage was elite. 80% snap share, 61% route participation. He took 15 of the 16 running back carries. He saw 17 of the 19 running back opportunities. And this was a player where, at least heading into training camp, there was not a guarantee that he was going to get this type of usage. In fact, that was kind of the biggest concern was you had Najee Harris there. How long would it take him to kind of break away as the clear-cut RB1? And it seems like it didn't take any time. Week one, he had incredibly strong usage. And this was also a spot where he had kind of a boneheaded play towards the end of the second half. He goes out of bounds, pretty much cost the Chargers 3 points. And so that could have been a spot where maybe you start to lean on the veteran more in the second half, go to Najee Harris. The usage didn't change. Harbaugh pretty much took the blame for that. It seems like the Chargers are still very, very in on Omarion Hampton. And this was just a tough matchup. In 2024, the Chiefs allowed the fewest points per game to the running back position by over 2 PPR points per game. I thought overall the Chargers offense looked great. They went out, they beat the defending AFC champs. We got great usage out of Omarion Hampton. And so I feel like people freaking out about this is kind of crazy. And so if you can capitalize on that, I certainly would. I think the only reason why you wouldn't want to bring Omarion Hampton onto your roster is that you just don't believe in him as a talent, right? Because if you think, all right, he's not that great of a player, then maybe he continues to struggle, and then you have Najee Harris start to earn more and more opportunities. But it is very rare that you have a round one running back. He starts off the season with this amazing usage, and all of a sudden he's going to start conceding touches to the cheap veteran free agent you brought in. I'm very in on Omarion Hampton. On the teams I've drafted him on, I feel great about the week one usage, and I think he's going to have a lot of bigger games moving forward. Then the next buy low, it's going to be 2 players. It's going to be these Jaguars wide receivers. I'd say it was an overall underwhelming day from this Jaguars offense, pretty much with the exception of Travis Etienne. But for Brian Thomas Jr. here, he had 1 catch for 11 yards. He was really saved with a 9-yard rushing touchdown, or this would have just been a complete bust game in your lineup. And I do think it could be somewhat concerning to someone who drafted BTJ. You took this guy at the 1-2 turn. The wide receiver only catches 1 pass. That's certainly not a great start to the season, but he still commanded 7 targets. The usage was there. He had 100% route participation. And so this is just me trusting that BTJ is a great player. He was the wide receiver 11 in points per game as a rookie. I still believe in the Liam Cohen, Trevor Lawrence combination. And something that I'll talk about a lot early on in the season when it comes to whether or not I'm worried about certain guys. I worry a lot more about usage than I do actual production. If you come into the year and someone's struggling and their role is vastly different than what you were expecting, there's definitely cause for concern there. For BTJ here, I really do think it was just a down game. And then for Travis Hunter, it's not like he had an awful performance, first game of his career, 6 receptions for 33 yards. The usage was very strong, 82% route participation. He led the team with 8 targets, took 69% of his snaps out of the slot, and he only played 6 snaps on defense. And so I don't think someone who drafted Travis Hunter is going to look at this performance and be like, oh my gosh, I need to move off of him. I just think even with where he was drafted, he is still a value at this point where his price kind of was where it was due to the risk of him potentially being part-time on offense, part-time on defense, really splitting his snaps. At least at this point in the season, it does not look like that is the case where he's pretty much full-time on offense, barely working in on defense. And the only way I think we see like a major uptick in his defensive snaps is if he's just not great at wide receiver. But if that's the case, then like he was never going to pan out anyway. So I drafted a lot of Travis Hunter. If there is like a small buy window after week 1, I would certainly be taking advantage of that. Now, I think these next two players I talk about, it's going to be pretty controversial, but I want to talk about these Dolphins wide receivers, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as buy lows. Now, this is not me making the case that like just one bad game from the Dolphins, things are going to turn around. Like, don't worry. I am very, very worried about this Dolphins offense. Like, don't get it twisted. They looked awful. This is the part of the season where, like, they should be cruising. That's been the trend where they start off solid, and then once the weather starts to get bad, they just completely crumble. They fall apart. This team went out and got blown out 33-8 by the Colts, and I think people are full-blown panicking on this offense, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I think that does open an interesting buy window for both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, because at this point, like, the Dolphins are not looking like contenders. I would be shocked if Tyreek Hill ended this season on this roster. The vibes have been bad pretty much, dating back all the way to last year. Even some of the comments in preseason, they've just been off, right? He's already, frustrated on the sideline. So I do think that Tyreek Hill is going to get moved at some point this season. And he goes from, potentially like all-time low in value as of right now to, if he gets moved to the Chiefs or someone like that, all of a sudden his value is skyrocketing. And so I feel like I'm kind of like almost going more overboard on like fading the Dolphins, where I do think they're bad. This is not a great start to the season, but you can see the nuclear upside where Tyreek Hill gets moved to a very favorable situation. And then with that being said, for Tyreek Hill, you now also have the upside for Jalen Waddle, where right now he's like the wide receiver 2 on a bad passing attack. If Tyreek Hill moves on, all of a sudden he's the number 1 wide receiver, still probably on a bad passing attack, but at least he's going to command a lot of volume. And we saw last year, right? Like, it's not like the Dolphins were great. Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane getting peppered with targets, you can still produce even if the offense isn't firing on all cylinders. Now, I will say for Jalen Waddle, he did leave week 1 with a shoulder injury. He's really struggled to stay healthy. It seems like he's just always banged up, but I feel like there is going to be like a full-blown fire sale on both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I'm not paying anywhere close to like pre-week 1 ADP. I want to make that clear. Like, you're buying these dudes at a real discount, but I'm not going to fade away from scooping these guys up on my roster. I do think they're talented players. I think they're good wide receivers, and I think both guys in the second half of the season could end up being in much more favorable situations. So once again, not saying I think this Dolphins offense is going to turn it around. I understand the panic. I'm already kind of waving the white flag a little bit on being in on both Hill and Waddle coming into the season. But, yesterday's price is not today's price. If people are going to panic sell, I'd be interested in taking on these talented wide receivers. And then the last player I want to talk about today is Tony Pollard. He didn't have a great week 1. It was just a brutal matchup to start off the season, going up against the Broncos. The Broncos allowed the 3rd fewest points per game to running backs in 2024. You had a rookie quarterback in Cam Ward going up against arguably the best defense in the NFL. Tony Pollard only managed to put up 7.9 PPR points, but as expected, the usage was elite. 89% snap share, 68% route participation. He took 18 of the 20 running back carries, only 1 target, which isn't great, but there was like 12 total completions. It was not a great game. I do think Cam Ward actually played better than like the stat sheet would tell you. Like, he was not getting helped out at all by his wide receivers, and in a bad matchup, like, no one should have expected Cam Ward to come in and just set the world on fire. But I think Tony Pollard's going to have this locked-in workhorse usage for at least the next 3 weeks with Tajay Spears on IR. I am encouraged with what I saw from Cam Ward. I think maybe this Titans offense could be a little bit better than what we were expecting or what they were projected for, which was like, bottom 3, bottom 5 in the NFL. And even if you're not in on Tony Pollard long-term, which I think is, totally reasonable, I do think there's going to be another sell window opening up, or, an initial sell window in a couple of weeks where he's going to put together 2-3 really strong games with nice usage, and then you could pivot off of him, if that's what you want to do. But that is going to wrap it up for some of my post-week 1 buy lows. Omarion Hampton, the Jaguars wide receivers, the Dolphins wide receivers, and then Tony Pollard. Like I talked about, I'm way more concerned about the usage, someone's role, than their actual week one production. These bad games happen. Sometimes it just goes down in week one. So if you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Questions, comments, feel free to drop them down below. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.